Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about something in MarcEdit known as task automation. So I've recorded a few videos on this in the past, but I wanted to provide something that was fairly comprehensive, at least to talk about what task automation looks like in MarcEdit 6. The same functionality is available in the Mac version as well, so I'm going to use the Windows version as the example. This is partly being done because I had been in New York and I was having a conversation with folks about automation and some editing functions in MarcEdit, and I had meant to get to talking about this, and I just ran out of time. And so I realized, looking through the YouTube videos and the documentation, that a good deal of the information about task automation tends to be piecemeal. I've talked about it in a number of different parts of specific functionality, but I'm not sure if I've ever pulled it all together. So I thought I would go ahead and do a quick recording to just talk about what it is, how you work with it, how you share them, how you can manage them, all that good stuff. So this is using the current version of MarcEdit that is in development. So 6.35 is the auto update version. That's what everybody, I think that's probably ahead of the version that most folks have right now, but all the functionality that I'm going to talk about will be in a version of MarcEdit that is fairly current. So let's start with there. All right, so I'm going to start with talking about what the task automation is and what it isn't. So task automation is run from within the MarcEditor. And so the MarcEditor is your notepad-like environment. And so from within the MarcEditor, MarcEdit has the ability to do something that is like a macro recorder. This allows you to essentially record actions within the various global updating tools. So within MarcEdit, you have here this part here called Manage Tasks, and in this interface here, you can create essentially little mini programs that will perform a set of actions across a set of records. So what's the use case for this? So the use case for the task management, task automation, was really as a way to take those best practices documents. I'm not sure about other folks, but when I was an active cataloger and I worked with vendor records, I would get a set of records from a vendor and I would have a Word document that listed 12 to sometimes up to 20 or 30 things that I would be checking, or edits I would be making, or updates, all these kind of things that I would be going through on a regular basis to see if the records had certain data or were missing specific data fields. And as my workflow transitioned to using MarcEdit, those best practices tended to be, I'm deleting these fields, I'm adding these fields, I'm editing these subfields, I'm doing some find and replaces, and so there was a lot of stuff that was that would live in that best practices, which were basically just individual edits that I was looking to run over and over again. So the task automation tool really is designed to take that set of steps that you run and turn them into a single operation that you can just run on its own. So when you work with the task manager here, tasks are broken into two separate groups, in my mind, the way I like to think about them. There are tasks that perform individual operations. So these would be like standalone programs that perform a set of actions, and maybe this standalone program or this standalone task would only be run on a specific vendor file. The other kind of task that I envision, that I imagine, are tasks that include a core set of questions or operations that I would run on every file, or maybe every vendor file. So in a lot of cases, and maybe I'm the only one, when I would have my best practices document, in those 12 or 20 steps, there was going to be a set of shared steps that I do across every vendor file. And so in the task automation tool, there's this concept of both tasks, as in a single standalone set of operations, and tasks as in a shared library of tasks. And so you can actually create a task library that includes all of those shared operations and then include that into your vendor specific task list. So that way you don't have to replicate or copy the same operations over and over again. So you can isolate the kind of things that you need to do per vendor and then include a reference to another task that would handle all of the common threads. All right. So this is the task manager. We're going to come back to this. I'm going to come back to this because there's something else I want to talk about. So in task management, there are obviously some benefits to being able to share these. And there are three ways actually, to share tasks within MarcEdit. The first way to share tasks, and this method is really designed more for I'm in a small organization where maybe I don't have a network share, or I've picked up a new computer, or we're getting a new staff member and we're setting up a new computer and you want to share your configuration stuff with them. In MarcEdit, there is a place in the main window, File, Share Configuration Settings, Export Settings, and from here you can share copies of your configuration options, your XSLT functions, macros and tasks, so all of your tasks, as well as templates. So you can actually, when you get a new computer, my recommendation is to, before you throw out your old one, go in here and check all these boxes and export them into a file. And then in MarcEdit, you can come back to your new version of MarcEdit, go to Share Files, and import those old settings, and bring your version of MarcEdit up to you can bring your configurations with you. So that way it's like you never change computers. But this is also useful for if you get new staff, or a new staff member gets a computer, or maybe you just have a cataloger who's been doing a lot of work with tasks. You want to share those within a small office where you don't have a network share. You can export your tasks this way and share them back with your individual staff members. So that's one way you can do it. The other way you can do it is you can actually export individual tasks. So let's say you're working within an office, you don't have a network share, and you want to just share a task with an individual. Or maybe you were talking to somebody at another organization, and you're talking about a process you're working with, and they think, that is a great idea. Can you share that with me? You can select your task or multiple tasks, and then you can export it. So you can go ahead and click on Export, and it'll create a .task file that can then be imported using the tool right here, Import Task. So you can create that .task file, which includes one or many tasks, email it or send it to whoever it is that's interested in it. They download that to their computer, and then they can click on this import link, find the .task file, and import it into their task manager. Now, the format that the share your settings option that we looked at first and this task manager export are not the same. They do two very different things. So if you're using the share your settings option, you have to import using that function. If you're exporting tasks, individual or multiple tasks, using the task manager and creating a .task extension for your data, you have to import them back using this particular tool. You also have the ability here to back up all your tasks, which essentially creates a zip file that potentially you could even share as well if you wanted to. Let's talk about what happens if you're in a network environment. So if you're in a network environment, say you're in a place where you have access to a network share, you can actually configure MarcEdit to have everybody use the same location for their tasks. So if you open up your preferences and go to locations, MarcEdit will tell you where the current task folder lives. By default, it's going to point to your local system and to a place in the MarcEdit application directory. And so you can point to a folder on a network share, either a network share that includes a drive letter, so a mapped network path, or a network path using a UNC location. By default, MarcEdit uses 300 milliseconds as a timeout. If your network has any latency there, that potentially may be too little. The reason why that timeout is there is Windows by default will set the timeout for looking for drives at somewhere around 5 minutes by default, although if you you could see that your folks can manage that. I was running into all kinds of issues locally. Our timeout here at Ohio State is set somewhere around 300 seconds. And so when I was off my network and trying to connect to my local task folder, MarcEdit would try and resolve the network share and then just sit until Windows finally said that it wasn't there, and then would go on. So in order to avoid those kind of performance issues, I've added a specific timeout that will allow MarcEdit to interact with those spaces faster and decide that a network isn't connected sooner. And so that's why this timeout is there. I think that for most large institutions, large academic institutions that have reliable networks, I personally haven't had much problems with 300 milliseconds in my environment. I know, talking to other folks, that this number has to go up a bit, sometimes as high as a second, in which case that would look like 1,000 milliseconds. 1,000 milliseconds is equal to 1 second. And so you really have to kind of get a feel for what your network looks like. Now, what happens if MarcEdit, if you point to a network folder and you're not on the network, or MarcEdit thinks that your network hasn't connected? Well, what it does is it uses a local copy of your network tasks. When you point MarcEdit to the network and MarcEdit connects to that network share, and that becomes your default location, the first thing that it does is it mirrors a copy of your network tasks and keeps them locally. And what that means is, if I'm off my network, let's say I'm traveling and I'm working and I don't have access to my local network share, that's okay, because MarcEdit will keep a copy of my network stuff. Now, I can't edit that local copy because the master copy lives on the network, but I can certainly still run against all of the tasks that I already have. And so that allows you to still work whether you're on the network or not. But this has been, I think, really useful, because you can have somebody who manages essentially all of your network tasks and have those shared with everyone within the institution. And likewise, if you get a new computer, by default, MarcEdit will point to your local drive. When you first install MarcEdit, you can just point to the network folder where those exist, and MarcEdit will automatically then pick them back up, so you don't have to go through the process of exporting your tasks and re-importing them. So it simplifies the process. So sometimes, if there are problems with your tasks, either network or local, you need to reassociate them. MarcEdit has here a troubleshooting option, which will allow you to repair your task file. So this will allow you to restore network files from backup. So if I'm on a network, and I'm not right now, it would allow me to restore those network files, or I can select an option to relink tasks. So let's say for some odd reason something came up where I can see all my task files, but the file that tells MarcEdit that they exist has been corrupted. I can use that troubleshooting tool to relink those files back to MarcEdit so that MarcEdit knows that they're there and how to use them. Okay, so that goes to sharing. So how does that task actually work? So let me go ahead and open up my task manager again. So tasks essentially work like almost like a lightweight macro recorder. So I'm going to create a task. And when I'm ready to edit it, I select my task and I go ahead and click on Edit Selected Task, and I get a blank list. So I can add a description to it. So this way, if I export it to somebody else, or if I look at it in my task manager, I can see what it's supposed to be doing. And then I need to just add actions to it. So in the Mac version, actions are drop-down lists. In the Windows version and Linux version, actions are found by clicking on that button. And then you can select from a set of actions that are available to use within the task manager. So what kind of things can you do? Well, you can run a replace all task. So if I wanted to do something in the find and replace, I can click on replace all, and then I can perform actions here. So and that includes regular expressions or conditional searches. So let's say I want to add the word Blu-ray to my to the beginning of my subfield A, but only if that shows up in, say, like a 538. So let's say I want to do something like that, and so then I can perform a conditional task, which says equals 538 $/$a .star in case there's anything in front of it, and then B in case it's uppercase blue, and again in case it's uppercase red, and regular expression. So this way I've got an expression here that's going to add to the 300 field the word Blu-ray in between at the beginning of the subfield A, if in the 538 I have there, so I can replace all. So I've got a task there. Maybe I don't. Maybe I want to add a delete field task. There are 900 fields, and I need to get rid of those because my local system doesn't select them. Maybe I don't want to keep anything but LCSH headings, so I can say 6xx, and then I'm going to evaluate the indicators, so that's going to be 3. So second indicator, I'm only going to keep things that are, that I'm going to delete everything that doesn't have a second indicator of 0. And then maybe I need to, after that, add a field, because I need to add, say, like a note field, edited with my task. And then let's say we want to run, because we know that the 245 in our vendor data is all in uppercase, so we will go ahead and run an initial case and turn all the 245 data to initial case rather than all uppercase. And then we want to run the RDA helper. And we want to wrap this up by adding subfield zeros to our data file. And last but not least, we will finish up by cleaning any smart characters. So those like smart quotes and things like that, because we don't want to keep them. So we've created a task. We can save this. And so now I have a task here that'll perform every one of those options on whatever file I select, and I can actually assign it to a key. So I have 20 keystrokes that I can assign it to, which case I would select my keystroke, select my task, and click on key assignment to assign a shortcut to it if I want to do that. I can then, if I needed to, extract it, relink, rename, clone. So if I wanted to make a copy of this, I could clone it. One thing I want to point out, go back to edit, you'll notice in the drop-down box there is a link to add a task list. So let's say these were the operations that I needed to do for my specific vendor, but I had a set of shared operations that I do for everyone. I could click on add task list, and you'll see that all of the tasks that are defined show up in this box, and I can select one and then reference it in the task list. So now that's there. So now I have a task that's also going to call another task. And the way MarcEdit works is it actually will track what tasks are being run, so that way you don't create race conditions where maybe you have a task that calls another task that's already running, so it would never exit from a loop. MarcEdit will protect you from doing that. So let's say we have our list here, and now we have a set of tasks we can run. And so if we go ahead and select a file, and this file is not going to have many of the things that we're looking for, but I'm going to go ahead and create, I'm going to go ahead and add a few things here. I'm going to change the title to uppercase, just so that we can see some changes here. All right. So we can go ahead and we have our set here. We can run our tasks. So we can go here and we can look, and you can see here's the task that we just created. I could click on Shift F2 and run it as a keystroke, or if I want to, I can click on currently available tasks, and it'll show me all the tasks that have been created, and I have access to all of those. I'll go ahead and run this one just so you can see what happens at the end. And so when you run a task, what happens is it tells you the results. So in this case, it says, okay, it looked for this stuff. There was none of these in this particular record. It deleted all the 9xx fields. And I should point out that each operation, when a task is completed, the next task performs its action based on the results of the operation before it. So if I deleted all the 9xx fields, but I wanted to add a 9xx field afterwards, I would need to do the deletion and then the add, because if I added it first and then deleted the 9xx fields, I would delete the field that I added. Here you can see that I deleted, I ran this one, there was none in this particular file. I added a 500 field, subfield edit results, one modification made in the lower casing of things. Or in the initial case here, we did the link data task run, and so everything was finished. And I have a log, so if you've turned on logging in MarcEdit so that you can see what changes were made, you can click on the log file and see that this log file was run. This field was deleted, this field was deleted, this field was added. This is what the edit subfield looked like, so the one that has the uppercase, when I changed the case statement, you can see that it was the MarcEdit RDA helper was run, that we ran a build link on this and created links to LC and VOF. That build link was ran and created links to these 300 fields, and that this task list was run, so it ran a task list, that started and stopped, the initial task list finished, and the task finished. So you can see a log of all of the operations that were completed. And let's say you didn't click on it there, you can go to Reports, Manage Logs, and view the current log here. So this allows you to look at all of the changes that were made. So I ran my task, maybe I have 20 or 30, or I've seen up to 100 elements in a task list. You can then go to your reports, and as long as you've turned logging on, look at all of the changes that were made. Now what's even more cool with the logging feature is, let's say you did have 1,000 vendor records, you ran it through, or maybe local records, and you were updating them. You ran your tasks, and you only wanted to update into your catalog the records that were updated. You could go to Reports, Log Files, Advanced Log Management, and click on Extract Change Records, and MarcEdit will only extract the records that it's updated through the global editing processes. And so you would only then load into your library system those records that were changed, and the rest of the records that weren't changed would be left alone. So through the task management, I'm able to automate this process. Now I can actually, so that's pretty cool. So let's say I want to automate the task running. So MarcEdit has a command line tool. Here's my command line tool, and if we look at the application here, I've created an environmental variable that will allow me to skip writing the path to it, but it's called cMarcEdit.exe. On the Mac version, it's just the MarcEdit application. And so that's the console file. If I include a help parameter, I can see all the values that MarcEdit's console file uses. And one of the options is task. I can point to the task, and I have a -s and -d, which is the source and the destination files that are there. I can include a silent option, and there's also an experimental option which allows the program to do the process without having to, using a embedded task process rather than kind of shelling out to the main application. So I could take the task that I just created, so let me go back to MarcEdit, the task file that I created for my sample task, find the name of it really quick here. So in my task manager, the name of the task, my example task here is called task file, and then it's the date, so it's going to be 2017-505. So if I go to my task folder here, so it's under macros, here's tasks, I can look for the file that I just created, and so it's this one. So this is my file. So I'm going to go ahead and run that task. So I'll get the path. So let me go ahead and open this up. So what I can do is I can go to the directory where my actual file exists. And so here's my file. So I'm going to go ahead and run this against, this is my desktop, so I'm going to go ahead and pick an MRK file. How about we pick, let's see here, I'm just going to grab I have a bunch of them here. Which one am I going to use? I'm going to use this one, z39.mrk. So I'm going to go ahead and call my program. So marcedit-path/cmarcedit.exe. Source file is going to be z3950.mrc. Destination file, and I don't have to include the full path to the source or destination file because I'm in the current folder. If I wasn't, I would have to provide the path or a relative path. Z3950 task.mrc, and then I go ahead and tell it, okay, I'm going to say task, and then I need to include the path to the task. So that's going to be the path that I've copied here, and the name of the task itself. I'm fairly certain this will run on a Marc file and not having to run on a mnemonic file, so we're going to make sure. And then I'm going to include the experimental tag, because that's going to allow me to run in a faster encapsulated process. You can also see the result. And so that should be all that I need. If I want it to be silent, so not report back any of the information that happens, then I can add that tag, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we'll run this. And you can see this is what happens. It tells you, okay, it ran the process. This is my simple task. That's the action it's going to run. It ran this, it ran this, it ran this, it ran this, and it ran these options too. So it did those particular values. I'm going to make sure, I think that actually, because we'll notice nothing happened in these values, so I think that the task, I have a feeling what probably is happening is the task needs to be run against a .mrc file, and that's okay. What I'll do then is I'm going to stack commands. So you can stack commands in the command line tool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that. I'm going to say path /c market.exe, source is e3950.mrc, destination is e3950.mrk, break, so it's going to break the file, and then I'm going to add ampersands, which tells MarcEdit to append next, and then I'm going to run it on that file, and I'm going to output it as this file, and we'll see if that gives us actual results based on what's in there. And there we go. So that was what was happening. So the tool needs to run on the .mrk file. So good to know. I couldn't remember. So in this case, we ran the process. Everything happened very quickly, and the reason why is because rather than running through any GUI components like the application does when you run from within the MarcEdit proper, this is calling directly against the library, the coding libraries. So we did the deletion, we ran another delete here, we did the add, the initial case, the RDA helper. We can run without the experimental tag if we want to. We can run them silently. And that should, I must have misspelled silent. Anyways, so you get the option to run some stuff. I'll take a look at the other thing. If you run without the experimental bit, the way it works is it actually shells this command out to the plain MarcEdit program, and while you don't see it, it opens the program in the background and runs the task. And there are some reasons why you might do that. Not all of the options in the experimental bit are or in the task list are supported by the experimental bit. Almost all of them. Everything in the global editing suite and whatnot it is. But there are a handful of things that haven't been pulled over yet. So we can see the difference here. You'll see it pulls up an option here that tells me that it's doing things. And then when it's finished, it should give me an output of that it's completed its task. So in this case, it's running the link data tool, and I'm not sure what data. There we go. So it runs the things that clean the smart characters. So you'll see it looks like in the experimental task. I'm going to have to take a look, but potentially the link data thing might not happen in the experimental task, and that's partly could be because I just haven't put them together. So I will. I'm continually updating that. That's part of the reason why it's experimental. But if you run it without the experimental bit, you can see that you can run tasks against each other through an automation here as well. So that gives you a couple of different ways to automate the tool. So using the tool here, and let me do this again, this time running with the silent marker, because I think that's why it's there. I can run here, and you'll notice that the box no longer pops up. So in this case, I could run it as a bat script, or if I'm writing shell commands that I'm using, like a Perl script or a PowerShell script or something, I can actually script running tasks and run them silently. So all you end up getting is just the task output, which you can then shell out to concatenate out to a results file or print to your screen without having to have that box pop up. So there's a lot of options, I think, in order to be able to run your tasks once you have them created. So the idea behind this was to give users an easy way to automate their workflows. So in the past, this has probably been, and I'll admit it, the part of the application that's been most challenging for individual users, partly because in MarcEdit I've always included something called a script wizard. The idea being that I had assumed that by providing something like this that gave you the ability to create kind of a template that then you would go into the scripting language and make changes to, most people would just learn how to code either Visual Basic or Perl and could work directly with MarcEdit's programming libraries. But in reality, that really never happened, and it was probably naive to think that people would, mostly because we're all busy. The other option that I tried at one point is I actually did include a full-fledged macro language like Connection, but I actually embedded the entire .NET framework into the tool. But again, it was really unwieldy to work with, and nobody wanted to do it. I didn't even want to do it. And so the task operation, the task manager, the task manager has really been kind of that trade-off to make it so that you can assign operations that you're going to use frequently through the global editing tools, and then be able to run them all at once. And the best part is about the task management is, let's say I've run a task and I'm not pleased with the outcome of that result. That special undo button here, which is grayed out because I don't have any files, I haven't done anything with it yet, I can undo the entire task operation. So if I've run a task and if it does one thing or if it does 100 things, if I run the undo button, it will take the file all the way back to what it looked like before the task was ran. And inside the log file, MarcEdit will mark that those operations were undone. So if you, say, ran a task, were unhappy with the results, undid the task, fixed the task part that you were working on, and then ran it again, and then used the log reporting to extract just the records that were changed, MarcEdit would only extract the records that were changed when you ran the task after it was undone. So it's smart enough to be able to keep track of when things have been unwound and when things have been processed. So hopefully that gives you a fairly clear idea of how I've tried to address automation within the application. There are for sure other ways of doing this, the ability to create plugins and whatnot. But the idea with the task management has always been to provide users a way that they can handle the batch processing of records themselves without having to have any coding experience, any programming experience. Basically, just as long as they know how MarcEdit's global editing tools work, they can manage the automation of those processes through this interface, and then share the work that they've done with other users. So I get asked sometimes, are there other operations that can be built into the task manager? And the answer is yes. Right now the task manager primarily covers the content that's in this space here, RDA helper and the linked data tools, as well as the vast majority of the things in the edit shortcuts and the replace function. But that's mostly because those are the operations that most people tend to ask for most often. If we found that if there was a request to include additional data, as long as the operation could be automated in a way that the task manager could support it, I'm certainly willing to connect additional tools to the task management action selector. That's more conversation that I think happens at the community level, and those are the kind of things that I welcome from on the listserv and sent to me myself, sent to me directly so that I can understand where potentially the task manager has gaps, or where tasks have gaps, and where it would make sense to add additional connections to tools that are in the application. So I hope that helps. This was something that I had hoped to have an opportunity to go over when I was visiting in New York this last week, but we had a number of other things we talked about and just never had time. So I wanted to make sure that that I had an opportunity to talk finally about how task management works and provide a little bit more of a comprehensive overview of how you share, how you manage, and how you can run applications that are developed, processes that are developed using MarcEdit's automated task management tools. So if you have any questions, you can always feel free to reach out to the listserv, or you can email me directly. I'm easy to find. Okay.